You're listening to Filling the Storehouse podcast. I'm David.
And I'm Stuart. And we want to walk with you on the journey to living the abundant life through faith, family, and freedom. Our goal is to refine our why while helping you find yours. Together, achieve our best and highest purpose. In the end, we'll drive each other to intentionally fill our storehouse.
All right.
Hey, Stu.
Yeah.
I know you normally start, and you know Jerry and Steve better, but I just want to highlight before we hit record, unprompted by me in any way.
We already hit
Jerry
record. We already hit record.
No, before you hit record.
Oh.
As we're recording now.
Okay, gotcha.
This is a great start. Stu. So before you hit record, unprompted by me, Jerry said, if there are any excellent questions, I'm just going to assume that you wrote them, David. I just want to throw that out there.
Something else that Steve said was the three of us, myself, Jerry, and Steve, we all got married in August. And so that could be the secret to a long-lasting marriage. I'm just saying.
Yeah, when did you get married, David?
I was married in June 2008.
Oh, well, you know.
Eesh.
At least
I'm at 14 years. You guys are both at 41. So yeah. I think this is going to be an awesome conversation.
Yeah. So Jerry, Steve, hey, thanks for joining us today. This is Filling the Storehouse podcast. And for our audience, Jerry and Steve are a part of my accountability group inside the Life and Air Mastermind. And we meet every other week on a Monday morning, and we dive into, what our goals are, what we have planned, what we want to do, and then we hold each other accountable to it. And we've had amazing conversations. And what I've come to find out is these two men are amazing husbands. They have been both married for 41 years, going strong. And I just thought this would be a really fun conversation, really more so just for David and I to learn what we can do to continue our marriage and be successful to get to 41 years and plus.
Wow,
right?
Amazing husbands. I'm glad you don't have our wives on here talking.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I'm going to be sure.
In the other room. Hopefully she's not hearing any of this.
Well, we're going to dive into all of your secrets. But first, if you could, Jerry, you start. Just give a little background about who you are, where you are, and what you do, please.
You bet. Well, for starters, when Susan and I got married, I was still in college and she had graduated with an associate's degree. But we met when we were 16 years old. Susan had been 16 for 10 days, and her parents didn't allow her to date till she turned 16. And it was about 4 or 5 years before her parents were happy with that decision. They were questioning whether or not she had just grabbed the first guy that come along. No. I definitely married out of my class, but we met right after Susan turned 16. We're essentially the same age, but I'm a few months older than her. When we got married in August, I was 20 and she was 19. So one of the keys to being married 41 years is getting married young. I know that doesn't sound like advice that people generally give, but if you wait till you're 35 to get married, you got to live to 75 to be married 40 years.
Jerry, I'm not going to let my daughter listen to this because I don't want my daughter being married at 19.
Yeah, because Susan was married at 19. A couple months later, she was 20. But one of my key factors too, which is it's too late for you guys and for all the guys in your mastermind who've been married 8 or 10 years. But one of my key pieces of advice when I speak to young men is to choose wisely, to put a lot of thought into, because Susan and I did date for almost 4 years before we got married, even though we met so young. But we have been a partnership throughout that, but it's and our life has changed so dramatically. I'll get into some more of that, but we met young, and I'm pretty sure Steve and Diane have the same kind of angle because we're about the same age.
And before we go to Steve, I'm curious, do you, Jerry, is there anything specific that you would recommend as people are courting and some of the conversations to have, right? Some of the, cause it's great. It's the romance and you're buying the flowers and and I'm sure you guys do all this stuff still, just like you were when you were a teenager, but what are some of the things like practically to talk about? Do you encourage counseling? Do you encourage how do you How do you specifically encourage people to do it?
Yeah, there were two huge things, a lot of small things, but two huge things that Susan and I talked a lot about when we were dating. We grew up in a small town, different small towns, but she grew up in a town of 5,000 people, which was the county seat. I grew up on the outskirts of a town of 200 people that was in that town. So, but Susan had absolutely no desire to keep living in that part of the country and around there. And neither of us had a really great high school experience. We both were picked on as kids. And so she absolutely wanted to move away. So if I had been gung ho on wanting to live in my hometown, it wouldn't have worked out for us. So where you want to live, and not necessarily where you're going to live in your first apartment, but long term, what are your ambitions for life and where do you want to live? I think was a key thing that we talked about before. And then probably the biggest thing we talked about was kids. And Susan's ambition was to be a mom. You know, some people have different things they're shooting for in their life, different career goals, whatever, but she's known all along being a mom was what she wanted. And my dad was sick from the time I was very young. When I was in sixth grade, he had to go to the hospital in an ambulance. And from then until he passed away when I was a senior in high school, I ran the family farm. And dad was able to help some, but was sick. And my dad's illnesses were all complications from diabetes. And diabetes is hereditary, and it especially is hereditary in that it skips a generation more. So it's far more likely that my kids are going to have diabetes than that I am. And so I didn't want to have kids. I don't want to pass that on. And now I'm dating a woman whose life ambition is to have kids. So it's kind of important to get on the same page there. And both through talking to her and through talking to another friend of mine whose dad also is a diabetic, he kind of put it in this perspective is, you know, just because diabetes is hereditary and the complications that go along with it are, you kind of leave that in God's hands. If you're supposed to have kids, you're supposed to have kids. And so I decided that I was okay with having kids. Thrilled that I did. We have two boys we love very much, and we have two grand girls who are the light of our life. And I'm so glad that I gave on that one. But talking about where we want to live and whether or not we want to have kids are critical. You can't survive not agreeing on those.
That's good. That's good. That's great, Steve.
Yeah, well, probably a pre-story before meeting my wife. I started off on the wrong foot in high school, dating the bad girl. You know, she was pretty. She said all the right things, kind of got me going. But, you know, my mom and dad were so worried that I would end up with her because they could see that she was not the girl for me. And so, to make a long story short, that relationship ended, much to my parents' happiness. And I went to college, and I grew up poor, so I was focused on making a lot of money because I grew up in a small town like Jerry did, and we didn't have a lot of money. And so I said, I'm going to college. I'm going to focus on accounting. I'm going to become a CPA. I'm going to get hired by one of the national big public accounting firms. And I don't really care to date or find anybody till I get out and get my career established. Well, that's my freshman year. Diane is 2 grades ahead of me. So she's a junior and I'm a freshman in college. She just so happens to be roommates with my cousin. And my aunt had met Diane on several occasions, and she actually went and spent 2 weeks with my cousin Debbie one summer between college. And my aunt said, we got to get her in the family. She is an awesome young lady. You got to get her in the family. And so the very first party in college, I was there like 3 days before classes started. My cousin invited Diane and I separately to a party. And I started talking to Diane. You know, there's 30, 40 people there. And I started talking to Diane. And I'm like, I want to know more about this girl. She has got something that she was totally opposite in some respects. She was beautiful, long hair, all of that. But she had all the attributes, good character, had gone to church, was a great person. that my first person I fell in love with did not have. And to make a long story short, well, I should tell you this. After that, Diane had been engaged to someone else. And so when she went back to school, all the mature ladies in her life told her, when you go back, you just need to start asking guys out, because we had a twerp week every semester where the girls asked the guys. And so that's what she did. She had like, on twerp week, she had like 5 dates lined up, and she sitting there in the room talking to my cousin. I had hair in those days, wasn't bad looking, and she said, well, you need another one? Just ask Steve out. He's freshman, he's harmless, juniors don't fall in love with freshmen. And so I went out with her, and I say she fell for me on the first date. That's because we went roller skating, and I fell and tripped her, and she fell on top of me.
Smooth.
It wasn't the smoothest thing, but anyway, to make a long story short, it worked. And we actually got married between my sophomore and junior year, which was not in my plan originally. But, she graduated, she was teaching. And, I just felt like, we didn't have enough money to get married, but I just felt like if she graduates and goes home, someone else is going to pick this girl up. She's just too good. And so I kept pursuing her like crazy, and we got to a point in our relationship where she wasn't sure she was ready to commit. And I was kind of like a bulldog and just kept going, because I knew she's the one I wanted. And, the rest is kind of history. That's how we got married. We went through some things that, speaking of children, this is one of the classic stories when we were dating. We're getting serious. We're talking about important issues of life. And she says to me, well, I think I want to stay home and be a mom until the kids get into kindergarten. And I was immediately upset. I mean, I just immediately got angry, because that wasn't in my game plan. I was from a small town. I was poor. I wanted to make money. I wanted my wife to work. I wanted to have the 2 nice cars, nice house, all the things. And I remember going back to my dorm room and hanging out with the guys and bringing this up. I'm like, guys, can you believe this? She doesn't want to work. She wants to take 5 or 6 years off, have a couple kids, and stay home. And the guys looked at me, a couple of them, and said, well, I don't think that's such a bad idea. I think that's pretty smart. Oh, it made me mad. Oh, man, it made me mad. Well, to make a long story short, God did a little work on my heart. What are your priorities in life? Is it money, or is it family, or is it, God? And so, make a long story short, that's what she did. And in fact, she didn't even go back. We had 5 kids, so stretched out over 10 years. The youngest one is 10 years younger than the oldest. So she didn't go back to work for quite a few years. But then when the kids got in high school, she started helping me in the real estate business, because I was a CPA for 21 years. And then I started helping people buy and sell businesses. So I'm a business broker, merger and acquisition guy, but our other business is real estate. We have 62 rentals or doors, and Diane is the property manager for all of those. And that didn't start until our last kid was, I think, 13 or 14. Our youngest was 13 or 14. So that's kind of how we got together, and a little bit of intro into me.
Steve, so I saw 2 common threads there.
Yeah.
We both got married after our sophomore year in college, and our wife was the breadwinner in the beginning.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And
I don't think that's a model you want to duplicate.
But I guess if it's the right person, that could work out.
Well, what was funny in our relationship, in Diane's side of the family, you had to go to the father and formally ask to marry her. So he's a farmer, and we're in the Museum of Science industry in Chicago with the whole family, and I get him off to the John Deere exhibit and ask him if I could marry his daughter. He says, well, yeah, it's okay with me, but you really got to talk to her mom. Well, I talked to her mom, and her mom picked up on the fact that Diane was going to support me my last 2 years in college. And she goes, well, how are you guys going to make it financially? What's your plan for that? And so I'm kind of stuttering and explaining to her mom what the plan is. Diane's going to teach at a Christian school, and I'm going to work part-time. And, well, don't you think that's going to be kind of hard? Well, yeah, but I think, her mom was harder on me than her dad was.
Well, and I, by getting married while I was still in college, I actually gave away some money because my dad had died when I was in high school, and I was on Social Security money at that time. And I have two older sisters, and the younger of those two aged out of getting money in July, and we got married in August. So in August, my check increased from like 300 a month to 600 a month. But then I don't get it, and I had a direct deposit, and I left it in an account and never touched it. And I let the Social Security Administration know that we were getting married and I wouldn't be eligible for that money anymore, but they kept sending it for 9 months. And then so now there's 5,000 in there. And then they reach out and say, oh, we observed that you were married and we want that back. And I go, well, you observed I was married because I told you, and they wanted to know what kind of payment plan I could afford to pay it back. And of course, I would have been smart to have, today I would use that money and invest it in something. but then I just was the pride of being at that time 21 years old now, as I've had a birthday since they've been overpaying me. The pride of going, tell me where to send it and I'll send it back to you. Because I hadn't been using it. I had just let it set in a bank account that I didn't use. And we just wrote him a check, and they were shocked that a 21-year-old that had just got married was sending them 5,000 and change back all at once. But so as much as I grew up dirt poor too, and money was a motivator for me. Part of going to college was to earn money. But I gave away money by getting married. If Susan and I had just lived together while I was in college, I could have kept getting that money.
So let's go there.
God might not have been as happy with that.
Yeah. Let's go to the money. Let's go to money. You both, you're both real estate investors. You both talked about money, being, you guys were poor growing up and money was an issue. And you wanted to become, rich, so to speak. And you got married. So where does money come into this equation in 40 years of marriage? Because I know my wife and I fight about money. I know David and his wife fight about money. I know that money is probably the leading cause of divorce, right? So let's talk about it. How do the two of you, and Steve, let's start with you. Like, where does a money conversation come into the equation, and how do you continuously broach that subject to where you're still married?
Well, it is a good subject because one of the things that I was concerned about with Diane was she grew up on a farm, but her dad was pretty successful. He had a trust fund, and for all 5 of their kids, he put money away, so she went to college free. Her dad paid for it. And from what I viewed from her when I first started dating her, I thought she was a spoiled rich kid. And I was afraid that she was going to be a spender. And, I grew up poor, and I was really concerned about that. But as it turns out, it was completely opposite. She grew up on hard work, getting up and starting at 6 in the morning at 6 years of age, gathering eggs. That's before gathering eggs was all automated. Later in her life, her dad put in all these belts that automatically collected the eggs, and they didn't have to do it. But she'd be out there in this chicken barn. So she had an incredible work ethic and really knew how to handle money. What happened is I ended up being more of the spendthrift, because when I got money, well, I wanted to spend it. And she always knew you needed to save it for a rainy day, because there are some days that those chickens weren't going to lay eggs and you had to have a reserve fund out there. And, we've had to learn. We went, years ago, before Dave Ramsey, his precursor, there was a guy by the name of Larry Burkett. And we went and took one of his classes together and learned all we could. And then when Dave Ramsey came around, we learned all we could. And I was one of these guys that not only did I apply that to my wife and money, but to raising kids. I wasn't a very good father when we got married. The only motivation I had was I wanted to become good at it because I knew my minor in college, believe this or not, my major was accounting, my minor was psychology, and it seemed real common sense to me that if you beat your kids, they're going to turn out weird. So you really shouldn't beat your kids. Now, I'm not talking about a little spanking or pat on the butt. I'm talking about when people really beat their kids. So all I did was, man, back in the day, I knew I wasn't a good father, and I learned how to learn. I had to learn this quick. And so I listened to Focus on the Family all I could. And if they had books, I would buy it and read it. Or, when I went back in the day when I would run, we had these little cassette tapes. And, before the iPhone, I had the cassette tape on my hip listening to it while I'm running.
The Walkman. Yeah.
The Walkman, man. You're not a kid. And so I had to learn a lot about that. And we just naturally started to have a budget. But like anything, we would blow the budget, Usually it was me spending on her for Christmas or birthday or something, or a weekend away that we couldn't afford. And it really just gets down to the money issue. You got to talk about it, and you got to have, like, I have an expense fund, or I call it my personal expense fund, and I get a certain amount each month on just whatever I want, and we put that in the budget, and so does Diane. Now, she usually saves hers for a big purchase, where I tend to blow mine a little bit more frequently. But you got to give each other a little space. And the other thing along with money is you got to give each other forgiveness or grace, because you're going to screw up. I guarantee it. And I'm going to do something that makes her mad. And it might not be instantly, but over the next week or two, she's got to forgive me. And I've got to learn to forgive her for the same thing. I mean, I think, you think about, why do you have a good marriage? I think part of it is just we are easily forgive each other when we screw up. And that's huge.
I love that. Yeah. That's huge.
Yeah. Well, on money, the same thing. I grew up on a farm, and my wife did not, but she grew up in the big city, 5,000 people. But her dad was a part owner in a concrete company. And when she was a freshman and sophomore in college, and she got an associate's degree in computer programming. So she just went to college for 2 years, lived at home during that time, drove about 20 miles one way to college, and come home whatever time she got done. Sometimes her last class got out at 9 o'clock at night, but she cleaned her dad's offices. So she had a work ethic too, a different type of work ethic than getting up in the morning like I did as a farmer. We had a dairy farm. We were milking cows twice a day, every day, no matter what. And there was a McDonald's added to her town while she was in high school. She was actually employee number one. She was the first person they hired. So when she was 16, she went to work at McDonald's and worked there, and ended up being a responsible employee and planning when kids had parties and stuff there. She was the one coordinating that. So she had a strong work ethic before we were married, even though she grew up with more money. And I certainly had that concern that her wants were going to be greater than I could provide. And while I was in college, I did work. She was the key breadwinner once we got married, but I still had a job. And even by the time I finished college, I was working 2 jobs and going to college and playing basketball in college. So I understood the value of collecting money. We have never had a problem with her spending too much. I've told this story. I think, Stu, you've heard it before, but Susan could describe a purse she wants. She could describe what color it is and how big it is. It's this size, and I need at least a 14-inch strap so it'll go over my shoulder. She could describe that purse so well that I can picture it. And for 2 years, she's describing that purse that she's looking for. And one day we're in a store, and there's the purse she's describing. And she will pick it up, and halfway to the cash register, she'll decide, I don't know if I really need to buy this. You've been looking at this and deciding this is what you wanted for 2 years in your mind, and we found it. It's a perfect fit for what you want. And I have to talk her into keeping it. Don't put that down, keep it. She just does not waste money on anything. She's a big spendthrift. She will she shops at Goodwill and the Salvation Army. And so money has been an issue. And I know we're told, and we went through Dave Ramsey together, but our kids were teenagers by the time we went through a Dave Ramsey course. I laid aside some money for their college. We've done some things to allow for money, but I am a horrible budgeter. Or everybody says, you got to have a budget. And Steve said we had a budget, but we blew it. And follow it. Well, I don't miss my budget because I don't have one.
Sounds like David.
And when I like that style. I like that.
There we go.
So when money gets tight, this has been throughout my life. When money gets tight, I just earn more.
Good for you, man.
That formula. Yeah, working harder or taking on a second job or whatever it might have taken. And actually at one point had 4 jobs. 3 of them were part-time, but I was a high school teacher, and then I was a preacher in a small church, and I worked 2 shifts on the weekend on air on a Christian radio station. And then in the summer, I ran a recording studio at Six Flags. And so when I would leave the house at Friday morning to go teach school, I would leave there and at Friday night go to Six Flags, come home and sleep. Saturday morning, go be on the radio station. Saturday afternoon, go to Six Flags. Sunday morning, come home and preach. Sunday afternoon, go out to Six Flags. Sunday night, be on the radio station, come home and sleep. Monday, go to school. And the only breathing room I had was after Monday night. So Monday night, work on the lesson plans for the next week. Tuesday night, work on my sermon. And Wednesday night was relax a little bit. So I've just taken on another job. And I always dream that, and again, I'm old, so this number is going to sound strange, but if I could just find one job that would pay me $20,000 a year and I could give them my whole self, boy, would they get a bargain. And that would be all the money I need to live on. And at age 29, I found that job. And then it advanced, and that company ultimately led me to a point where I was making over $50,000 a year. And a couple of times in life, Susan also was staying home with the kids. And once they got out of kindergarten, she was thinking she would go back to work, but then she was so involved in volunteering at the school that just didn't happen. And a couple of times money was a little tight, and we were talking about it and what do we do? And should she go back to work part-time? And on 2 different occasions, I got additional responsibilities and an additional raise at my job while we were discussing whether or not she should go back to work part-time. So we have been blessed to be a one income earner since Susan quit her job at 23 years old when she was pregnant with Kyle. And she did take a part-time proofreading job once for a short time. But we've been a one income job family all that time, but it's been possible because she has given me the support to work the hours it takes, to give the dedication it takes. I have worked way too many hours sometimes because it's important to be the breadwinner, and put in the hours. But because she did not work, I could work late. I could be on an out of town trip, and it didn't shortchange our kids any. So we've been fortunate that I've been the key breadwinner basically since we've had kids, but it's involved her. I've said this many times, nobody has a more supportive wife than I do. You might think you do, but at best you're tied. That's it.
Well, and Stu and I will happily, if 20 is your number, Stu and I will happily take any kind of difference that you have there, just so you can maintain this desired lifestyle that you want to do. I appreciate
knowing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, I've gotten a little older, I've raised that number just a touch.
Just a touch, I'm sure.
I'll hire him for $20,000 a year, man.
Yeah, right.
I'd love to have him for $20,000.
Yeah.
Hey,
it's funny. The job that I got that paid me 20 was a sales manager for a local newspaper, selling the advertising and managing 2 other people. And I did so well that I actually earned 29 my first year because they paid bonuses and commissions. But that's just how much it was true that if one place would pay me 20 and I could give all my attention to them, they'd really get their money's worth.
That's awesome. But I recently, sorry, go ahead, Steve. What were you gonna say?
No, go ahead.
It's interesting because I had a really good conversation recently with one of the men in our mastermind, and we were in one of the groups, one of the houses we call them, we're talking about romance. And we're talking about romance in the context of, it was a really good conversation, but how do we maximize these areas of life, romance being one of them. And we had a follow-on conversation, and he said he was talking to a counselor buddy of his who's clinically studied marriage and romance and whatnot. And he said a lot of people think the biggest cause of strife in marriage is finances. This literally conversation happened a couple of days ago. And he said that the thing that's interesting and why our mastermind, he was kind of lauding the mastermind, how awesome it was because the men opened up in there. But he said that this psychologist friend of his said that they believe the real challenge is intimacy, but they don't have the data because most men are reticent to discuss their intimacy issues with whether it's counseling or whether just admitting that there's intimacy issues, because for a variety of reasons. Some men take it as a hit. I'm not a man because whatever this issue, or, they just feel it's not a topic they're comfortable with. And so I'm curious for you guys, you don't have to get into the juicy, steamy details of your intimacy for the last 41 years, but I am curious, I imagine that is a significant part of your marriage and that it wasn't always amazing. And I'm just curious how you broach that. How do you continue to, to feed that part of the relationship? And how do you get past some of these significant barriers with your spouse, to continue to thrive in that area of marriage as well? And Jerry,
well, child rearing takes a toll on that because you go to bed exhausted. And if in our family, when I was the one working long hours and Susan was the one caring for the kids, even though I came home, I might have taken the kids out to eat or something to give her a break, but still she's been caring for the kids all day and not just paying attention to them, but cleaning up messes and doing laundry. And so at the age when your kids need everything from you, you just fall into bed and you're thankful for every moment of sleep you can get. And so intimacy certainly takes a back seat in those cases. It's exhaustion, and you almost have to feel like I've got to set aside a time for it. Got to find time. And I grew up on a dairy farm, and you could never be away for more than 12 hours because you milk the cows every 12 hours. So we didn't grow up taking vacations. Going somewhere and getting away was foreign to me, and we still don't do a lot of that. We're doing a lot more now in the last 2 or 3 years, but intimacy certainly took a back seat during the time that we were raising kids. And then once the kids are grown and can take care of themselves, and now empty nesters, it has come back more than it had. So if you're in that middle range and you got toddlers, you got 10-year-old kids that are taxing all of your time, I tell you, there's a bright spot coming. Get those kids to where they can take care of themselves and you're not as exhausted, and you find the time and energy to be there. And I remember one time I was driving in my truck and my oldest son was with me, and they were on a radio station, and it was coming up on Valentine's Day, and the host was asking for guys to call in with ideas, things they did that were romantic for their wife, whether they did them at Valentine's Day or not. And Kyle said, "Oh, Dad, you should call." And at the moment I go blank. I'm going, well, I can't come up with a good example. But then I thought about it for a moment. I did get on the air and shared. And there's a particular story that I shared then that I've done. But, Susan does not like flowers. And part of why she does not like flowers is her dad was unfaithful to her mom more than once, and this is public knowledge. Not everybody in their small town knows. So if your podcast reaches enough of their small town, somebody may learn this. But her dad was unfaithful to her mom multiple times and would come home with flowers or jewelry. And so Susan views a gift of flowers or jewelry as, what did you do wrong? So Susan's favorite flower is the flower in Krispy Kreme donuts. She likes it when I bring home donuts.
Nice.
And but she likes Heath bar, candy bar. So one year at Valentine's Day, I gave her 24 long-stemmed Heath bars.
That's awesome.
I got a bouquet and got those wires that artificial plants go on, put some little flowery and baby breaths, green stuff in there, and taped 24 Heath bars to those wires, and brought her a bouquet of Heath bars, which sat on our piano for a month while she ate them a little bit at a time. And so your flowers sit up there and die off. Well, the Heath bar bouquet is getting less and less because
the gift that keeps
the
on
Heath
giving
bars are disappearing. But I guess the key here is to find out what she likes, because what she likes and what motivates her is not likely the same things that I like and that motivate me. And that is one of my key things in us having a healthy relationship, is sometimes doing something that she enjoys. And Stu and I could beat up on Steve. We know one of his secrets or one of Diane's secrets, but sometimes doing something that she enjoys that you don't necessarily enjoy is meaningful to her. And for there to be true intimacy, we can't just turn it on as we jump into bed. You have to be showing that you care for her and love her, and you're interested in what matters to her during the day. And if you've done that right, you reach the point where she's the one who initiates action when you jump into bed. But you've got to put that effort into doing things throughout the day that are pleasing to her.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Jerry. I read a book in my 20s. We probably married 1 or 2 years, and it actually was in a men's group at my church, and it was entitled "Sex Begins in the Kitchen." And it was the whole philosophy is that if your relationship is right with your wife, and you learn what she likes and what help she needs, is that sex will take care of itself. That usually when sex is not going well, it's because the relationship is not going well in some other fashion. And a lot of times that's when they're going through with all the young kids, they're just so tired. They need some help. I remember several times I called Diane before I'd come home, and she'd say, "Bring a pizza. Tonight is pizza night. I am so tired. I need to just, and other times I would say, "Tonight they're yours. I'm getting out of the house. I'm going shopping. I need to break." And, another thing we did real early in our marriage was go to a marriage encounter weekend. And if they'd have told me what it was before I went, I might not have gone. But it was such a great weekend because they gave you questions. And what they forced you to do was you wrote out your answer to the question, and your wife wrote out her answer to the question, and then you'd come together and talk about it. And it was amazing, the difference in communication. It's like, she was seeing the world through pink sunglasses, and I was seeing the world through blue sunglasses, and we weren't even getting together on several issues. And learning how to communicate like that was, and even still today, there's a book out there by Emerson Eckeridge called Love and Respect. And it's based on the scripture verse that men, you're supposed to love your wives, and wives, you're supposed to respect your husbands. Well, when we get off kilter, when we get on the crazy cycle, it's because I'm responding to her without love, and she's responding to me without respect. And so we just end up in a little argument or a big argument. And I always say I like arguments because I like making up, but that's a joke. That's not the truth. You just you got to communicate in a way and help each other. And when I get in the biggest trouble in my marriage, it's when I'm selfish and I'm just thinking about me, and I'm not thinking about Diane, or I want to do this, and I don't think about what Diane wants to do. And the more I defer and find out what she wants and what her needs are, the better the relationship gets. We just got back from a week of vacation, and Diane said, "That was a great vacation." And I said, "What'd you like about it?" And she goes, because you just focused on me the whole week. I didn't have to compete with your work. I didn't have to compete with phone calls. It was just you and I for a week, and it was awesome. Well,
So cool.
we tried early in our marriage to do that at least one night a week, have a date where we turned off the phone, and or the only phone call we would answer if it was the babysitter calling. And we tried to get away just to be together and talk and catch up and reconnect. Because when you got 5 kids, she's super busy, I was super busy, and you just got to take some time away. The other thing I'm big into was not only did we do it once a week for 3-4 hours, but we also would try to do it at least once a year, get away on a vacation, no kids, just Diane and I for 7 days.
Mm.
And when the kids were at home, that was the best week of the year always, because we could reconnect, we could talk, we weren't interrupted by the kids. It was just fabulous. And so, a lot of times you can't do that, pressure of money. I remember taking the kids to my mother and father-in-law's house for a week, and then us going to my mom and dad's house because they were gone, for basically a free week away. And, you get creative, get your friends to watch your kids a week, and then you watch their friends a week, their kids a week. Find a way to get together and reconnect.
Yeah, and we had to do that with friends because my work and my ambition brought me to Florida, and a job that was 1,000 miles away from where both of our parents lived and had no family here. If it weren't for church, we'd have had nobody to lean on to watch our kids. We dealt with some of what I know you've gone through, Stu, is where do I leave my kids? Who do I trust my kids with?
Yeah.
Where how can I get away? Because I'm not comfortable if I get away and I don't know for sure that my kids are safe. And one of the mistakes I made is I did work in some high paying, high pressure W-2 jobs, and then I'd drive home in traffic and I'm frustrated by the time I get home, and I want give me 30 minutes to just relax and unwind. Okay. But she's been dealing with the same kind of pressures at home with the kids, and she's happy I'm home and wants me to take the kids and give her 30 minutes to relax and unwind. And it took me a while to get that. It didn't happen in a week or a month, but maybe over a year or a little more to realize. And even if it means once I pulled into our subdivision and I'm no longer fighting traffic, drive really slow for the last 2 miles home, take a couple deep breaths and just relax myself so that when I get home, I unwind and reach that point of, as I pull in the driveway, to remind myself that where I'm going now is more important than where I've been. And that's tough for men, because as men, our identity is wrapped up in our vocation and our success. And so to acknowledge that my family and my wife are way more important than my career, that didn't come naturally. We've probably been married 25, 30 years before I could comfortably say that.
Well, that's huge. I mean, there are a lot of men that we connect with, and we're kind of in our mid early 40s, and at the height of our like earning years, and just like you said, Jerry, like that's where our identity is, And David and I had a big transition. Really, our identity was being in the military, being an officer in the military, and being a leader in the military. And then one day that all goes away, and now we're like entrepreneurs and we have nobody to lead, and we're like, oh man, this identity thing is kind of a tough thing. And to say to yourself that I'm going home to my family, which is the most important thing, is huge. Like that's like a light bulb moment.
Yeah,
every man
I was older
should hear.
than you guys. I was older than you guys are now when that came to me. So maybe I can give you that a little bit younger.
It's huge. Now. It's huge, man. And, one thing that I did notice, back to this romance question, one thing that I've noticed about the two of you, when we've gone on these life and air retreats and you bring your spouses, every single time we leave to like go somewhere, both of you, I've noticed, hold your spouse's hand.
Yep, we do.
And I do a terrible job of that, to just grab my spouse's hand, my bride's hand, and just hold it while we walk, right? Just going somewhere. And that like little like that little thing, I know would mean a huge deal to my spouse, but I don't do it, and I don't know why. And so I've noticed that about the two of you, and you guys.
Well, thank you. And Susan and I have had to adjust that because as we've got older, my hands are bigger than hers, and she's got a little arthritis. And we used to hold, the traditional way that a couple would hold hands, and we can't anymore because that hurts her fingers. But at least she felt comfortable enough telling me that, so we hold in a different way. So that is just so ingrained in what we do that it is that we've had to adjust how we do it as we aged, even. So.
But the
Hey,
point
and
is,
something
the point is you're being intentional about it.
Yeah, it is something that we meant to do, and I open the door for her. Walk around the car and open the door, even when it's raining, and she goes, "I can get it on my own." I know you can, but it's just a choice that I've made. And I want to piggyback on something Steve said too. This is one of my most important things. In fact, it's the only thing I wrote down that I wanted to be sure to share with you guys today. And I think I shared this with you, Stu, so you might have been planning to bring this up. But Ephesians 5:25, and if you're listening to this and you're not a Christian, I'm going to relate this where you can just take it as a man and not take it as God's word. But Ephesians 5:25 says, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her." And you put all of that into context, and it's about wives to show respect and to your husbands and so on. But and as I mentioned earlier, that one time when I had 4 jobs, for 6 years in my life, for 7 years of my life, I was a preacher. Never intended to be a preacher. Didn't set out to. I believe every kid that grows up in the church ought to consider it. I considered it, and it wasn't for me. But while I was a junior in college, a church near the college needed a preacher, and I filled in for him. And then I filled in and stayed, and they were small enough they couldn't afford a full-time preacher, and they'd had lots and lots of guys come and go just like me. They'd been there for a year, and then they graduate college and then move on. And I got another job in the area and stayed as their part-time preacher and stayed there 7 years. And it was actually good for the church. They grew to a point where they needed a full-time guy. It wasn't me, and I moved on. But so I've preached some, and this is something I've shared over and over in that and in a men's ministry that I lead and used to lead in our local church. That if there is anything wrong, and this is being recorded, okay, man, if there is anything wrong in a relationship, it's the man's fault. Okay, and I mean that with my whole heart, because put that in context. Husbands, love your wife just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Christ was willing to die for the church. And so men, if you want to take the Bible out of this, if you just want to take it as advice, men, love your wife enough that if you had to, you'd be willing to die for her. Okay, if you love your wife that much and show her that on a regular basis, if you're not getting along, eventually she's going to come around. Because if you continue to show that kind of love and dedication, how could she not warm up to it? And Christ continued to love the church that way, even when the church rejected him. And each one of us individually are the church, as well as the church as a body. So even to the individuals who Christ died for and they have not accepted him, he still loves them enough. He's willing to die for them. And so if he keeps doing that, ultimately people are going to see it. And I know people have all kinds of faith flaws and they don't see it for whatever reasons, but in a man and woman relationship, men, if you keep caring for your wife enough that you would die for her, she will eventually reciprocate. And even if she doesn't, you're not released from that command.
Hi, Jerry, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is so true. And the one thing that I take away from that, in addition to what you said, is love is a verb. And if you remember what a verb is, a verb shows action. You can say, I love you all I want, but when you start showing it and doing it, you'll improve your relationship. You got to show it. Open the door, hold her hand, wash dishes. Oh man, maybe I don't like to wash dishes. Or help do the laundry once in a while, or, watch mowing the lawn, whatever it is. Help take some things off her plate and show her love. I mean, one of the time, you talk about Heath bars. My wife is Snickers bars. So a lot of times when I'm going through Home Depot to get supplies, I'll just grab a Snicker bar and give it to Diane. I'm showing love. I'm taking action. And she teases me on, oh, I got to keep my weight down. I'm like, don't forget, when I bring you a Snickers bar, it's okay because I'm saying I love you. And, just find a way, whatever it is, man. Love is a verb. It takes action. You can't just say it, you got to do it. And I don't know what it is in your relationship, but find out what it is and do it continually. And I think the other thing about using the analogy of Jesus in the church, think about how Jesus forgave us of our sins. I need to forgive my wife when she screws up. When she asked me to watch Hallmark instead of a football game.
Yeah.
Oh my word. That's a tough one. Now, usually we tape them both so we can watch them both at different times. Yeah. And I'm blessed because my wife actually likes to watch football with me. But there's always something that, I asked Diane on our week vacation, what do you want to do? She goes, honey, you know what I really want to do? I'm like, oh, here it's coming. She said, I'd like to take an afternoon and go to secondhand stores and go to antique stores. And I'm like, what? No, I knew and I said, honey, that's fine. Well, guess what? You spend 6 hours doing that. You get home, intimacy just comes natural. Yeah. And why? Because you invested 6 hours in saying, I love you, doing something she knew I didn't like doing, but I did it with a smile and had fun with it. And so sometimes you just, giving and the verb love, man, you got to show it. That makes a big difference in your relationship.
Yeah, and identify what that thing is, because the thing that motivates me, if you're familiar with the love languages, my first one is physical touch. I didn't ask for that one, but it is.
It's all guys, Gary. Come on,
that's right.
Gary, come on, it's all guys.
It's a really short book when the men are reading it.
That's right.
Yep, there it is.
Yeah, okay, got it. Okay, and I suppose my second one is words of affirmation, telling me I did a good job. Well, that would be Susan's second one too, is words of affirmation. But her first one is acts of service and little things like we run the dishwasher. Steve mentioned doing the dishes. We run the dishwasher at night. You get up in the morning, and there's clean dishes in the dishwasher. In less than a minute, I can put those away, and that means so much to her that they're put away. And now whatever's dirty in the sink from last night can be put into the dishwasher immediately. That's a minute out of my day, not even every day, and it means the world to her. So.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that. And I appreciate you guys, being honest and transparent and giving some actionable tips. And I love that, that love is a verb. And I think if we were just more intentional about taking action to serve others, to love, especially the priority, because a lot of times our priority relationships are the ones that suffer the most from our lack of giving and our lack of love and taking action. So, man, I really appreciate it. I taking notes, and we'll listen to this again. And I just think that, it brings so much hope also to men like Stu and I, to see men like you guys who we respect as businessmen and entrepreneurs and investors, but also, and most importantly, as family men, as men who can, you live the example of how to grow and foster and be, have a 41-year marriage and continuing strong, and also do the things that we mistakenly identify ourselves as being, extremely important priority things, which really are not. It's these relationships, it's the kids and what they see us doing and how they see us honoring, our wives and honoring them. And dude, I love it. Love it. So thank you guys for.
Well, and I got a story to tell you to show that my wife is forgiving. Okay. It's not just that I got to be forgiving. There's something that I learned in the 35th year of our marriage that I was doing wrong. Okay. and I'd been doing it wrong the whole 35 years, and she had stayed with me. Okay. And I brought an object lesson. This is a bag of Doritos from the other room. Okay. So when I'm done eating Doritos, I know that you can't leave them open. So you gotta fold them down and clip them with your chip clip or whatever brand of clothespin you use. That's wrong. That's not how you do that. You have to fold them over and over and over and get all the excess air out of them. And that will keep them fresher. I don't believe that, but
For 35 years, she's gone in after you and tightened
she's
them
going
down.
down and rolling them all the way down. And she just thinks I know how to do it, and I'm choosing to do it wrong. and she's correcting me silently for 35 years. And one day somehow it came up. And so I've learned how to properly, we both love junk food. I just didn't know how to keep it fresh.
So, there you go. Now you know. You can teach an old dog new tricks.
That's right.
Can I give you guys one thing that I learned a long time ago? It wasn't that long ago. It was kind of like what Jerry said in year 35. I listen to podcasts pretty frequently, especially when I run or when I'm driving. And this guy challenged us. It was someday in August, and if I did the math, I could figure it out. He said, now, whether you're the man or the wife in your relationship, I want you to do a gratitude journal for the other person. And for the next 90 days, I want you to write down one thing every day you are thankful for in your spouse. It might be the way they comb their hair, or what, they fix for dinner, or the fact that they do open the door for you, or whatever it was that day. Find something every day, one thing a day for 90 days, and then give it to your spouse on Thanksgiving. Well, I did that, and I can't tell you the look on my wife's face and how much that meant to her, that for 90 days, I thought to write down something. And ever since then, I have kept a gratitude journal, not just on Diane, but on my life in general, and tried to come up with one thing I'm thankful for every day. And it's amazing how it changes your outlook on life, because it's so easy to be self-centered. It's so easy to be selfish. It's so easy to take your spouse for granted. Hey, it's Friday night. We're having sex, man. We always have sex on Friday night. Well, you know what? Maybe not. And then if not, I get upset about it. If I find a reason, just being in a state of gratitude and thankfulness, it amazes me how much it improves our relationship. And not just only for her, but other thankful things, like what a great sunset, or I was up running this morning and what a great sunrise we had. I'm grateful that guy saw me running and didn't back out he actually saw me when he's backing out his driveway, because some people don't see me. And I got to stop or go a different way or something. And I tell you, you do a gratitude for your spouse for 90 days, it'll show you things about your spouse that are awesome that you didn't even recognize. Just neat.
I love it, Steve. I love it. I'm going to accept your challenge, and I'm going to take that challenge and then challenge all the men in Storehouse Mastermind to do the same. So we're actually talking like in 30 minutes. So I'm going to bring it up. So thank you. I love it. Guys, this has been amazing. I know we could probably talk for another hour, especially with Jerry, because Jerry likes to tell stories. But this has been amazing. Like David said, I've taken a full page of notes. And some of the stuff that you guys are talking about, the love is a verb, and just pouring in and taking action and being intentional. This is stuff that David and I are trying to do daily. And we're trying to get, the men in Storehouse Mastermind to do it. I am so thankful and appreciative to be in a group with the two of you, meeting every other week and just getting amazing advice from you two. I'm grateful for that, Steve. So thank you. Hey, guys and gals, reach out to Jerry and Steve. They are amazing men. I'll put, if you guys don't mind, can I put contact information in the show notes?
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
All right.
Absolutely.
Dave, you got anything else?
No. Thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate it. I think your words will be a blessing to our listeners. And no, thank you. Thank you for the example you set. And, Stu told me a lot about you guys, and we've taken action on things you guys don't even know that we're using that he's gotten from me in the group. So thank you so much. You guys are awesome.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. We enjoyed it.
All right, guys and gals. Hey, reach out to these two men. Share this. If you like this episode, tell somebody about it. Tell somebody about Filling the Storehouse podcast. Screenshot it. Share something on your social media, and reach out. And most important, go fill the storehouse.
Yeah, make it a great day, friends. Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks for listening to Filling the Storehouse. If you enjoyed our show, please subscribe and share it with someone you love. And if you really felt inspired, leave a 5-star review so we can continue to grow and help other Christian entrepreneurs fill their storehouse. If you're interested in creating financial freedom through real estate investing, be sure to check out our website at storehouse310turnkey.com. We'd love to serve you through our platform of building the kingdom. Just click on the contact link and we'll reply to you as soon as we can. Again, thanks so much for listening. Now go fill your storehouse and make it a great day.